one of the things I always try to impress upon you is that you may not realize it, but right now you're making friendships that will last throughout your life. And the churches of Christ, we're a relatively small group. So you don't realize right now, but 10 years from now, your best buddy will be preaching in Houston, Texas, and then maybe you'll have a buddy who's preaching somewhere on the other coast, and you'll have friends who are spread out all over the world, and you don't realize that now. Well, one of my friends, when we were in school, Brad Johnson, we actually talked about going to Australia, and I still want to, still plan to someday, but you just don't know where everybody lands and how it all works. But Brad was in school with us here and ended up going back to his country, and they've been doing a terrific mission work there. So we've asked Brad to come and speak to us and talk to us a bit about his work in Australia. And so we're going to not take up any more of his time, let him come, and he's going to give you an overview, I think.
Good morning. Good to be here today. Hey, Michelle. Really good to see you guys. Sincere thanks to the men and women of HCU. I would not be preaching the gospel where I am except for you. And the older I get, the greater my thanks are for your patience with me. I so appreciate that. I really, really do. It means a lot to me. Really good to meet some of the students here, and I want to wish you the very best for your studies. Hope that you just have an amazing adventure with the Lord. I'd like to share a brief overview of some mission points that my wife Ronya and I are involved with in Australia, and then at the end of it I just want to share a few ideas on evangelism. Take it or leave it. You are aware that there's many tragedies in the world. Just ask anyone who has watched children starving in Africa or maybe Haiti. Just ask anyone who's recently returned from an inner city context. Tragedies everywhere. Now, here are some of the tragedies that Ronya and I have been involved with in the last couple of months. It's a tragedy when a 5-year-old girl in the outback of Australia, beaten and abused with cigarette burns up her arm, is forced to endure freezing conditions. Her parents use her so they can get a welfare check. That is a tragedy, but it's not the tragedy. It is a tragedy when a homeless 14-year-old girl in inner city Brisbane ends up turning to the oldest profession on earth to support a heroin addict, a heroin habit. It's a tragedy, but it's not the tragedy. It's a tragedy when a hard-working man with a mental disability ends up beaten and broken and living in a parking lot. It is a tragedy, but it's not the tragedy. The tragedy of tragedies, is when people don't hear about Christ. That's the tragedy. This tragedy eclipses all other tragedies. Now, the reason why this is the tragedy above all others is that there are many people who were killed in Auschwitz who turned to the Lord somewhere in that process and are going to go to heaven. Many of those who lost their lives in the killing fields of Cambodia have an eternal home with God. The folks who died of Ebola in Southwest Africa, in spite of my wife's cousin Kent's best efforts, we're going to see them in our Father's home. There's folks there that found the Lord and were faithful to the Lord. In any third world hellhole that you can name, there are people to be found that will have an eternal home with God. Now, all of these situations in which people are forced to endure great deprivations are tragic, but nothing near the size of the tragedy when people pass from this world without hearing about Jesus. Sharing the gospel with broken people is what we're about in this institution, and it's what we're about as we go forward and do our thing. It's what you're about. And I want to share with you a few things about how we share the gospel in our small corner of the world. My wife Ronya and I facilitate 3 mission points: West End Church of Christ, also known as West End Christian Fellowship; Indigenous ministries, which is a way of saying Aboriginal ministries. The term Aboriginal has actually fallen out of favour. And then there's Cleveland Church of Christ, which is a small, middle-class suburban congregation. And I'm not going to talk about that a whole lot because in many ways it's similar to congregations you'd find here. There is continuity for us between those three ministries. The volunteer base moves around. Discipleship training happens in those three places. Young men and young women find a place to practice evangelism outside of their own home church context within those three things, so they're linked to each other. First up, West End Church of Christ. Started out as a ministry to university students, but transformed to an outreach to street people. I thought we were going down there to start a work to university students. God tapped us on the shoulder, metaphorically speaking, and said, I want you over here. We meet at 5:30 p.m. on a Sunday on a rented hall. We have 40 to 45 regular members attending there, and given that most churches of Christ in Australia are around 35 members, we're really happy with that heading. Some nights we have as many as 70 or 80. And we have a solid team of volunteers that make that mission point possible. We have a group of cooks, a group of chefs. We have people that are specialised interactors with street folks. We have street preachers, and I'll explain a little bit more about that later. We have people where security is their thing. Now, in that inner city context, the most disadvantaged members of society are all at West End Church of Christ. Drug addicts, prostitutes, mentally ill people, they're all members of that congregation. They call that their church home. As relationships develop with those folks, we have one-on-one Bible studies, and then we move them towards a commitment to God. On an average Sunday night, our program at West End looks like this. We have half an hour face-to-face time. That's where we will circulate in the group, just talking to people, greeting them, hugging them, and making them feel loved. We then serve a meal. Then we share a street-friendly sermon. Now, what that means is you start out with a metaphor, something that's completely accessible to anyone who is from a non-church background. So I will start out by talking about light. What's light useful for? What does light stop you from getting into trouble with? How do you like to manage light? So you'll talk about a commonly accessible metaphor, and then you'll shift into a spiritual application of light. Well, you know, 2,000 years ago, there was a bloke and he brought light to the world, but it's a different kind of light. And then you'll move into the spiritual meaning, and then you will make your application from there. One-point sermons, because the average cognitive age of people at West End Church of Christ is somewhere between 8 years old and 15 years old. So we have a street-friendly sermon. We serve the Lord's Supper. We have half an hour face time at the end of it while we all have dessert together. Now here's a couple of guys at West End. Trevor on the left, he has social acuity issues. Paranoid schizophrenic, and when he's on his medication he's just fine, and when he's not, we have our challenges. That girl up the top there, her name's Jazz, I'll talk about her later. Ronnie's a bikie. Now he's in end-stage cancer, and that's why he came to us. He's examining his life. Spent more time in jail than out of jail, but he's our good mate, and he is a member of West End Church of Christ. Over here, you've heard of fetal alcohol syndrome. Okay, that's Johnny. Now, Johnny was a fetal alcohol baby. He grew up, he can't speak. He can go yes, no, or I don't know. He makes hand gestures like that. He's one of our members, a faithful member of West End Church of Christ. Trevor up the top, he's a bit further along than Johnny, but has his challenges as well. Mark down the bottom there, that's Mark. Mark spends most of his days on the streets fighting Klingons on the bridge of the Starship Enterprise. That's the world that he lives in. And he comes in and knows that we're kind to him and love him. He knows about this guy Jesus and thinks of him in very childlike terms. He understands between good and bad, but it's at a very remedial level. Great guy, I love him all. Now that's Joel. Joel is a poster boy for methamphetamine addiction. You know those pictures you see on the internet with the before and after shots? That's Joel. We have survived a relationship with Joel over the last 2 years, but in the last couple of months he's come in dressed and in his right mind. He's getting past that addiction, and he was interacting in a Sunday sermon, and we've had a couple of Bible studies with him. God can rescue anyone. God, through the power of God, you can turn the hardest hardline drug addict around and good things will happen. West End is a place of refuge. If you've ever preached and had someone fallen asleep, well, that's actually a privilege there, because that may be the only sound sleep they get that week, because it's a place of safety. A couple of our volunteers, Robert on the left there was converted at West End. Now he helps serve food. He has shown love. Now he gives love. That transforming power of Jesus is incredible. Kilo up the top, she's a PhD student. Can you just back that up, mate? Back that up one slide. Thank you, sir. Got an itchy trigger for that. Kilo's a PhD student in drug research. She comes along and is one of our volunteers. And then we've got our scene where we get the food ready for the meal. We've got a whole bunch of volunteers that come in there and do things. Right, a while ago, at West End, every Sunday night is a meeting. Every Sunday night is a special outreach. And every Sunday night we have brand new people coming in. So we don't run a lot of special events because we don't need to. Every Sunday is a special event. We did run one recently, and it was called The Life and Doctrine 50-Hour Sleep Out. And that was all about drawing attention to the plight of street people. So I got some buddies together, and we spent 50 hours doing everything that street people did. Now, I've dived with tiger sharks, I've skydived, I've done all that stuff and thought I was pretty brave to do that. I've got to be really frank. Sleeping on the streets for 50 hours was by far the scariest thing I've ever done. Absolutely terrifying, getting woken up at 2 o'clock in the morning by a couple of thugs that want to beat you up for sport. Luckily, I'm big enough and scary enough, and my good mate is a jiu-jitsu expert. We won that one, and we sort of protected the group. We had a bit of fun along the way. We spent this time just wanting to understand and have insight what it was like to be on the street. Now, while we're out there, we gravitated towards a uniting church. We went with this one group of Aboriginal guys. They ended up in the uniting church. We met this lady. She's single after 40 years of marriage. Her name's Beverly. She gravitated towards a uniting church, but is not a member of that church and is unsatisfied with her experience there. She's a seeker and avid student of God's Word. So you're familiar with the idea of somebody seeking God's will. She's very much one of those people. And Ronya and I have been studying with her over time, and she's coming to see about the authority of the Bible and the need to sola scriptura, if you're familiar with that phrase. Every time I hear that in my head, I hear Wayne Kilpatrick's accent. And she's headed in that way. And she's gone off and done her own study. And one Sunday she came in, she said, "Brad, I've been on the internet. Who is this Basil Overton person?" And she got onto some of his sermons and had just watched them back to back and had discovered the brilliant purity of Scripture outside the institutions of human beings. And Beverly's well on the way to doing what she needs to do spiritually. There are heritage connections all over the world. All right, moving on. Indigenous ministries. We do a few things out west with Aboriginal folks. Now, the term Aboriginal has actually fallen out of favour. Nowadays, you say Indigenous Australians. Brewarrina Bound is a relational or friendship-based mission point. Mission Moree is a program-based mission point. Both those events are 1 week long. Both of them, we take teams of people out to engage with Aboriginal folks, Indigenous Australian folks. When we go to Mission Moree, it's arts, crafts and sports with a Bible theme where we stitch everything together. At Brewarrina, we basically run around in the bush with a rifle for a week on end, and then that night, as you are cooking the kangaroo that you just shot, one of the Aboriginal folks will say, "You've got a word from the Lord, brother," because they know I'm a preacher and they know the people with me are preacher types. And you'll get up and stand around the fire before the kangaroos cooked and share God's word. You have to go to them in their world, and I know Travis would fit into that world. You know, it's a particular sort of person that's okay running around in the scrub riding quad bikes or stalking razorback pigs on a creek, but that's what works for them. And when you get into that community, it's really beautiful. Mission Moree, a bunch of kids there, and they're getting a Bible skit acted out. They're from a communal, they're a communal culture. They do the narrative thing really well. So Bible skits, you don't just read them, you act them out, and it's really effective. Okay. Oops. Some of the kids there, we get a bunch of kids who are from parents that are either drug addicts or alcoholics, or people that have kids purely to get welfare checks. It's a very sad state of affairs. And because of that, they're deprived of affection. And these kids crawl all over you and they just want to be loved. So we serve them lunch. We have this 1 week program of basically fun stuff, and we've made a lot of ground with them. A lot of these kids are what you might call mixed culturally, but all of them identify with Aboriginal culture one way or another. Gentleman here is from Cleveland Church of Christ. Fred's my partner in crime in Australia, 75 years old, hasn't missed a mission Moree yet. He's an amazing man. Jono here was baptised, he's 14 years old, baptised this year. He went to Mission Moree, his first mission trip. So we're trying to build a missional expectation at Cleveland, and so far it's going really well. This was my son's ministry here. He's 11 years old, and he said, "What can I do at Mission Moree?" I said, "Make paper aeroplanes." And he did that with the Aboriginal kids. It was great. There's my wife up there doing a puzzle. This girl was a 3rd Dan black belt in karate, taught the kids how to do karate, and tried to bring some discipline and order to the violent lifestyles they have. A lot of mentoring and discipleship happens. That's some of the guys from our last trip. And you know, we've got forklift drivers, we've got PhD candidates, we've got economists. Really, really mixed eclectic group of people there. There's my wife leading kids singing. There's my son holding up the signs. And the theme for the week was looking for God's treasure. There's me reading a Bible story. We get a cappella singing in the park one day, and talk about a powerful evangelistic tool. The Aboriginal folks really connected with that really well. The distances involved in doing Aboriginal ministry in Australia is incredible. You're talking about thousands of kilometres between communities. And that's the truck we use. It's got a camper on the back and it carries lots of water. And the bottom line is, with that vehicle, we can go into a community and be entirely independent, 3 people for 7 days. And because you can't just go to the corner store, you're out in the middle of nowhere. So that's some of the scenery you met with. Out at Brewarrina, this is the relationally based ministry. Bradley Gordon with his prized pig dog, that's one of the guys we go chasing pigs with. Studied with him a few times, he was baptised, he's converted, he's got a good job, he's doing really well. Sing along around the campfire every night, and that's some of the guys there. Sono was a methamphetamine addict for years and years and years, really neglected his family. After a series of studies and a lot of text, phone texts, he came to the Lord, doing really well, really proud of Sono. And there's Ike Gordon butchering a kangaroo that we were going to eat later that night there. Not everyone's cup of tea, but a lot of fun. All right, now, I want to share with you a few ideas connecting with unchurched people in Western context. Now remember, this is about unchurched people. This is not about stealing people from other churches. All right? This is about connecting with people who don't know God. Now these are just ideas. The idea of having someone come from the other side of the world and share evangelistic strategies that could be inherently flawed, coming into a culture that I'm largely not familiar with, or it could be useful depending on how you think about it. Either way, a few ideas, and this may be affirming what you're already doing. First thing, boys to men. We have used this in a Works Like a Beauty. Get men and boys together Have somebody lead a demonstration in how to change the oil in a car, clean a fish, service a lawnmower, invite men from the community, unchurched people to bring their sons for a time of learning and fellowship. Works like a beauty because it's a non-threatening environment. Everyone wants to know how to fix a lawnmower. Another idea, Women's Book Club, totally non-threatening thing. So you select a book, you have a group of ladies read it, you invite non-church ladies to be part of that group, then you have discussions together on the deeper spiritual realities of life, and you use that as a springboard into Bible studies. Use that one, works really well. Everyone wants their kids to succeed. After school tutoring or homework clubs work really well. There are tremendous benefits with this one because I don't know any parents that don't want their kids to do better than they did. Do it for free and then tell them why you're doing it for free. Because you want their kids to succeed too, not only in academic realm, but also in the life and godliness realm. But again, it's a way to establish that contact with a secular mind and then lead them into church. Now, I've never tried this one here, but I've used it in Nashville a bunch of times because I always land in Nashville and I'm always jet lagged, I'm always up at 2 o'clock in the morning. Go to the Waffle House and there's something about the difference between the daytime crew and the nighttime crew, but I have found that you can walk up to anyone and start talking at 2 a.m. in the morning. There's just some sort of camaraderie thing going on there. I share my story, they share their story. What's important to you? Hey, look, I want to leave you with this, and here's the little pocket giveaway New Testament, and you just leave that with them. Hey, I want you to have this, take a look. And it's just something about 2 a.m. I don't understand it. There's a PhD in that for somebody somewhere. But it's a powerful opportunity. This is working in Brisbane really well right now. Some guy put a dryer and a washer in the back of a van and had his electrician friend wire it all together. And you go into a depressed area in town, you pull up, you hook up to a tap, and hey, come and wash your clothes for free. And works like a beauty. It's a way to build bridges. We have a couple of counsellors at Cleveland, counselling type folks, and so we run community support programs, divorce recovery, life transition, stress management. Make it known that this is a safe place to come and share. When I was sharing this idea at Bellevue Church of Christ in Nashville, big church over there, they're actually doing this and it's working really, really well. School Mother's Coffee Morning. All right, so mothers struggling with a busy day, get some of your mothers that have had children, that know what that road's like, and share life's wisdom in the context of a cup of coffee. Magic things happen over cups of coffee. Great opportunities happen. Cooking classes. Things are getting tight. Cooking on a budget is becoming a reality for a lot of folks. And getting people together and how to cook good, nutritious food on a budget is a great ministry opportunity. You get to eat together afterwards, eat what you've cooked, and it goes really well. I thought maybe this could work in this part of the world. Turkey frying. How many gallons of oil is involved with that? Lots and lots, yeah. Last thing, how-to groups on just about anything. Financial management, holistic parenting, public speaking. Keep trying something different until you find something that works, till you find that you're meeting a need, and then you stick with that and refine it. Now, all these ideas are all about building robust, sustainable models of evangelism. It's good to be passionate about any skill or interest you have because you draw people to yourself based on a shared interest in something. It could be motocross, it could be absolutely anything. Walls come down and bridges are built. And within the context of that relationship, sharing deeper spiritual realities and sharing the gospel becomes normal. The weirdness comes out of it. Many things that work well in middle-class contexts, or any context for that matter, are going to be relationally based. And the reason why they're relationally based is because God made us that way. We're relational beings. Clear expressions of the gospel become possible and normal within the context of relationship. And it's Jesus' way, that's what he had in mind. Not everyone will answer the call, but the spreading of the gospel becomes possible. Now, all these types of activities, those 10 I showed you, and a whole bunch more that you can think of, require leadership. Leaders become great leaders via a process of failure. So a church culture, an institutional culture that embraces failure as an opportunity is really, really important, because that's how great leaders are made. You can't have great leaders without the ability to deal with failure. Guys, that's all I've got right now. I think we have a few minutes. I will be happy to answer any questions you may have. You may not have any, but that's just skipping over the high points.
This is a good opportunity, guys. Brad, you fly from Sydney to where to Nashville?
Fly from Brisbane to LAX, 14 hours. And then the next most direct way to get across is from LAX to Nashville, which is 5 hours, about.
I made that trip one time, and it's every bit of every how many hours you said. Yes.
It's a challenge.
Yes, it's a challenge. It's wonderful once you get there.
Chat about post-Christian, Australia sort of post-Christian society, that's kind of where it is.
So, well, that's where America thinks it's at. In Australia, we have a predominantly secular mindset. In the USA, my understanding of the most recent statistics is that you have a post-Christian mindset. But I must say that sitting in airports, traveling, sitting on planes, I haven't met a person yet on this trip that doesn't believe in God in some form, all right? In Australia, you are hard-pressed to find somebody that believes in God in any form. So that's the difference, all right? Now, while institutional values in the USA might be perceived to be moving away from a Christian worldview, in Australia we never had a Christian worldview. So you do not approach somebody with the authority of Scripture because they never believed in Scripture to start with. What you do is you demonstrate the reality of Scripture through service. Service and Jesus' love speaks to anyone in any culture under any circumstances. You can't talk about the authority of the Bible, but making somebody a cup of coffee who's, on the street who has been scared to death. Being with that really wealthy mum who has chronic depression that scares all of her friends because she's depressed. Being willing to go to that person in love, wanting to share gold, and continuing to do that over time demonstrates what's written about in Scripture. But you don't go in with the Bible going, hey, this is powerful. There's no one to believe it. Is that what you mean, Trey? Yeah. Sorry? We do. But it's an idiom-heavy language. So there's a whole bunch of phrases. When I come to Florence, I change my word choice dramatically, except when I'm trying to confuse somebody. It is. Now, my wife's from Alabama, so I've got a lot of, we spend a lot of time laughing about that stuff. But yes, it's English, but it's idiom-heavy.
Well, I was just wondering, because we watch a lot of movies, and they have certain ways they talk, and I don't think always curious if you know what's
Yeah, no, not realistic at all. Movies are commercial products, and it's got nothing to do with reality. It's got to do with making money. Like the Outback Steakhouse, it's embarrassing. Has anyone heard of Handy Lunches in Florence? Okay, now that girl that runs that, Caitlin Watkins, she was an intern with us, not last year, but the year before. And what we do at West End has a number of parallels with that. But it's the same principle. Bill here's scary, he's been on the streets, he's like the wild man spoken of that ran amongst the tomb. He's terrifying. But within the context of sitting down and looking Bill's in the eyes and not being scared by his appearance, and sharing a meal together, powerful things can happen. Within that context, you can share the gospel. But guys, well, girls certainly too, but you know, I based my manhood on all the manly things I'd done, like diving with tiger sharks and all that sort of stuff. No, I'm pretty brave. But when it comes to sharing the gospel with the most broken members of society, that's when you'll find out how brave you are. That's when you will confront your innermost insecurities. Now, on the other side of that, there is a strength and richness and a self-reliance that I can talk about for weeks on end, not in my context, but in watching other men and women be transformed from a place of fear to a place of godly power. I'd really encourage you to put yourself in uncomfortable situations. It's good to be uncomfortable. You grow when you're uncomfortable. The first IBC, back in IBC, when Heritage was IBC, the first door-knocking campaign I went out on, you really confront some inner demons. Now, the efficacy of that is an entirely different stuff. The effectiveness of any given evangelistic strategy, you've got to think about effectiveness, whether it's worthwhile. But in all cases, confronting what you're scared of, go there. It's really worth doing. Well, that's all we've got.